evening, folks. This is Town of Waterboro Zoning Board of Appeals, May 24, 2018. This is a public hearing. Is an administrative appeal requested by John Barth for the requirements requested by the code enforcement officer. At this time, I'd like to bring the meeting to order and determine if we have a quorum. It appears that we have 4 out of 5 members, so we do meet the quorum requirement. And at this time, I'd like to introduce members starting on my right, please.
Andrew Orr.
Jim Southworth.
Sean Shoemaker.
Robert Lehman.
Okay, we have done that. The next item is to determine jurisdiction in this matter is given to the ZBA by authority of the Waterboro Ordinance, Article 2, Section 2.04. This is an administrative appeal, so I would believe that we definitely meet that standard.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
At this time, we'll need to determine if the appellant has standing before the board to meet the standing requirements. The appellant has the right, title, and interest to represent in this.
Yes, I was asked to bring a letter of Lennox School, authorizing me to represent the school. I'm the chief officer of the school. That's not a problem.
Okay, I'm going to pass this around. This is from the Lennox School. The person concerned, this letter authorizes John Barth, President of Lennox School Incorporated, Massachusetts, Chapter 180 Nonprofit Corporation and IRS 501 Nonprofit Corporation to represent the corporation before any government entity. I'm going to pass this on, but there's a little more information we have to have. Because you are a corporation, we're going to need to see some corporate papers that determine that you have the ability to write yourself the letter to act on your behalf. Do you have that?
Oh, I didn't bring corporate documents with me, didn't I need that, but I think I did include some of the, but I don't normally bring the corporate documents.
Mr. Chair, you want me to make a copy of that so everybody will
Yeah,
have one?
if you'd like to, that'd be good. So everybody has one.
Easy to pass it around.
Yep.
I don't think I have corporate documents with me, but I can produce those if needed.
Okay.
If the secretary actually has determined that the corporation...
Can you speak up just a little bit, please?
If the secretary has determined that the corporation owns the property, she'll probably find the deed signed by me. It was I who gave the property to the corporation.
Right, the deed went from you to the school, so hence you as the seller would automatically sign the deed.
Now, do you guys understand what we're talking about here? Any questions on it?
And I do have the deed, sir.
I do have a copy of the deed. And it does show that he sold the property to the Lennox School. Unfortunately, doing that, your name's on the appellant. For the case, you need to show us corporate confirmation that you have the ability to assign yourself to represent.
Yes. Well, I will do that. I was not told in advance, so I didn't bring the it's a lot of documents. The filing cabinet's full of documents, but I can put together a file of sufficient information, and I can email that to the secretary for them.
guys have all had an opportunity to read the letter from Natalie?
Yes.
Okay. You understand the impact of that? Okay. Yes? At this time, in reading the information that we have from the town attorney and a requirement that authorizes him, shows corporate documentation that allows him to act on their behalf beyond a letter of authorization, as it appears to be able to write himself a letter, but he needs to do it in capacity of president or director of the school, depending on the article of incorporation or bylaws. And he will also need to provide supporting corporate documentation that whoever authorizes him has the authority to do so. And we don't have that.
That shouldn't be an issue. It can be checked on the internet, because not only can I give you that information shortly, but it's actually available online. I'm the only surviving corporate officer and have been for several years. All the documents of the school are now signed by me. All of our filings with the Massachusetts Attorney General Department of, it's the corporations division, but it's public charities division in Massachusetts. It's all online, so that can be checked, and you'll see that in the chief officer of the corporation.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, please, Glenn.
Mr. Barth did get the request for the corporate documents this afternoon. Granted, it's a short amount of time, but we didn't realize this had transpired until most recently. I guess I would recommend that the board hear both sides of the story, and depending on what your decision is, you could make that decision conditional. You know, if the vote is in favor of Mr. Barth, then that vote would be conditional that he shows you support, and give him a time frame to do that. If that time frame is not met, then your vote would become null and void. So that's just an alternative. Obviously, you have the alternative to postpone this meeting to a further date, or go with my recommendation to at least hear both sides of the story. You might need more time to do the research after you hear both sides of the story. That time would allow Mr. Barth to get those corporate papers. So that might be another choice that the board could have. You know, hear both sides, and before you render a decision, wait for the supporting corporate documents, set up another hearing, and give your decision at that point. So we'd be looking at basically 2 nights, and the ZBA is used to having 2 meetings in cases like this. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you. I'm kind of on the same feeling myself that we're here. Let's hear what we've got here, and you can prove your corporate information at a later time. One thing I forgot to do is remind everybody to please sign in as a sign-in sheet. We need to have everybody that's present on that paper. How's the rest of the board feel? I feel that we should move forward and listen to it, and then continue to give him an opportunity to provide his corporate information. Everybody feel good with that? Okay, that's how we're going to move on now. Okay. So at this time, I'm going to open the hearing to a public hearing, and we will give both sides an opportunity to present their case. Glenn, did you want to read this information?
Well, I just have I just want to know the public knows what we're doing here tonight. So this is the administrative appeal, as you said, against the Water Rose Code Enforcement Officer, which is myself, for requirements of Mr. Barth to submit a new building permit application and an engineering study for what's in the ground presently. I'll have pictures on the screen to show you what's in the ground. As you said, Article 9 grants the ZBA authority to hear this hearing, so tonight, or eventually, the board will decide either to decide whether the code enforcement acted correctly in requiring a new permit and additional engineering, or you will grant Mr. Barth's opportunity to proceed with construction with what he has. I want to remind the board that you can't, let's see, you can't waive a building code. So he still has to build by code. The ZBA can't alter that or amend a state building code. So the only thing you would do is actually grant him to proceed on the permit that I feel is void. Any questions on that part?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, at this time, I would ask the appellant to come up to the podium and state your case, please.
All right. Let me give the...
I need you to make sure you speak up. I'm hard of hearing. I just want to make sure everybody can hear you. The people behind you will have a hard time hearing.
Okay,
So.
remind me if I don't. I have a problem with my neck. It shakes a little bit, and I tend to speak too softly. I'll try to do that. But can you hear me better when I'm closer?
That isn't a microphone.
Oh, it isn't?
So it's-
Okay.
Just for
Try to
the
remember to be...
It's for the cameras that are.
Okay. Question of what I should do first. I could review the chronology if you'd like. I'd answer the questions of butters. There were some technical questions that could be got out of the way first, which I wasn't planning to deal with, but if you want, I can do that. Should I do that first, do you think?
I'd like to hear the timeline. I'd like to hear the timeline of everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
We want
The timeline,
to know why you're appealing his decision.
Okay, so about in 2005, I had bought the island, already got a permit from Saco River Recorder Commission for the buildings as shown in the general drawing, but not for the particular changes. And not building permit, but just with all the setbacks and the position. And they made it very difficult. They wanted, they would not approve the house being moved a little closer to the water because what you've got on this island, it's glacially deposited sand and gravel. And it's fairly steep, most of it. And there was a saddleback in the ridge of the island, which is, if you look at the island, we had a survey to determine all the areas that are 100 feet back from the shore, which met the SRCC code. And we discovered there were 3 triangles that fit that category. 2 were too small to worry about. One of them, unfortunately, the point of it swoops down a steep hill into the saddleback and ends before you have much flat land in the saddleback to build on. And I had asked the SRCC to please make a variance. I'll put the septic system in there because that's what they're worried about with 100-foot setback, and let me move the house a little further over to the flat area so I could, because it's hard to excavate there on an island. So they wouldn't do it because the member, one of the members at that time, was the head of CMP's Hydro Dam Maintenance Division, and for him it was an easy matter to bring over a barge and excavator and somehow get it up a steep hill, but it wasn't really possible. So, but I spent 6 months designing a new version. That's why there are 2 guests instead of a 3-bedroom small house. There's a 1-bedroom very small house and 2 guest houses slightly down the hill, the steep hillside, so that the house could be long and narrow and perched on the top, and the 2 guest houses could be further down with no attempt to put in internal levels and divisions because that was not practical. So that's why it looks the way it does. And I got that permit in 2004 or 5. First, it's been renewed since. I wrote a letter to the then CEO of Waterboro. I think it was Patty Berry was her name, unless it was somebody before her. Probably it's February 2008, describing the plans and my skills in construction and drawing and so forth. And she said, your drawing should be sufficient. And I wrote, it wasn't until July that I described all the columns and the steel frame, and it was verbally approved. And I want to stress verbally because it was rather informal. The whole problem that we have is due to the fact that the town did not have a boat to go to look at things on the island. So she couldn't inspect it. I offered, of course, to take her out there to load her boat and load her boat in the canoe, but she didn't want to do that. So in July, she said it looked okay. I gave her all the drawings, of course, of the new house that had already been approved by SRCC, and she said that was fine. I mean, every single board is in the drawings is very thorough. Do 3D walkthroughs and everything, more than necessary. And gave the permit in September of '05. I then made some emails to her shortly afterwards on plumbing permit issues, just so that I could complete the design as to the plumbing and so forth. Assembled tools and boats and docks that summer. Got that fall, got that done. In 2005, she also assured me that the town, she said the town has no boat, so she would not make inspections at the island, and that I should send plan changes to her, drawn up as neatly as the ones I had, and then get her verbal approval, and when I was done building it, take photos, send her lots of photos so she would know what I'd built. And that was our inspection process. That was the whole thing. And I want to emphasize that I'm an engineer. I'm not a civil or structural engineer. I'm thorough. As thorough as I can be with what I know. And of course, I don't know all about construction. I've done a good bit, but I don't know every type of it. In particular, I don't know all about reinforced concrete. I just know a good bit about it. And so that was done. In 2005 and 6, I built a amphibious trailer, first one since the Second World War, and it worked first time, so that I could load stuff up at Home Depot or whatever, and move it over and just back it into the water and put an outboard motor on from the trunk and drive over there and winch the stuff up the hill with a 24-foot ride. It's a fairly steep hill and soft soil, so you can't easily get things up there. It's all forested. Okay, so all that was, both docks were built and everything. Some trees on site were allowed to be cleared under the SRCC permit, but they cleared exactly where the house had to be, and so those were cleared. And the lower piers were built with enormous work. It required over a week to dig one hole. Because I couldn't get an excavator out there, the amphibious trailer was wrecked in a car accident. And so, fortunately, the winch and so forth were not damaged, but the trailer was damaged enough it wasn't fixable. So, huge amount of work. So I had to do things manually up to that point. And I should stress, I'm not 45 anymore. I was 55 then. I'm 65 now. And so I don't haul things up the hill in that kind of quantity as easily without paying for it for months, canes and so forth. So things are not so easily retracted as they once would have been. So that was all done in 2005 and 6. In 2006, I emailed the CEO over completing the staking of the site boundary. She wanted to see photographs of the stakes in the ground. Had been staked, but they were not visible stakes. They were pieces of rebar driven in the ground. They were covered with leaves and stuff. So I put stakes in and photographed all that. And said I would begin foundation work as soon as possible this month. In winter of 2007, she said a new permit is needed. At the same time, I had sent her letters that crossed in the mail. She said, saying that, with drawings of pier changes, because I wanted to build the piers instead. Originally, they were 10-inch diameter cylindrical piers with 4 half-inch rebars in them. They were strong enough, but there was also cross bracing between them. And the only ones that I was planning to build right away were one of the guest houses, because then I could live here while building the rest of it, because it takes a long time to get back and forth. So that was the only practical way to get started. I'll point out to the public audience, because there were questions that these guest houses do not have separate kitchens, but that one was designed to have a kitchen initially, just so it could be used while building the rest of the house. And the kitchen was to be moved. There's only one unit involved, not 3. Okay, so and then she verbally approved the new drawings, and the idea was to go from 10-inch diameter cylindrical concrete piers to 16 by 16-inch piers created with 2 concrete blocks in order to get rid of the cross bracing, because the cross bracing had 2 problems. One was that it was, I think it was 1/2 inch or 5/8 rebar X pattern between the 4 piers and 12-foot centers of the guest house. And the problem that I was worried about was number 1, rust, even though it wouldn't be exposed to rain. It's an extreme windstorm. But number 2, I was afraid of vandalism, because there'd been a lot of huge amounts of vandalism. I have a little camp on the next little island, and that is not for permanent occupancy. And so I wanted to get rid of the cross braces and thought I could maybe put a boat or something under it, or firewood or something under the house if I didn't have them out there. So she said that was okay. And I said at that time, the foundation for one or more of the structures should be ready for inspection by next fall. Okay, so she said she would renew the permit. Don't worry about it. And in 2008, she said, she said a permit amendment will be submitted if heavy piers are extended up. So the idea was I was going to build the 16 by 16 inch piers and then maybe keep the 10-inch diameter piers above them, make the big heavy ones underground, and maybe put the lighter ones above. And the idea was to make more flatter surface area below ground, so if you had lateral loads, it would push against the sand, but I still didn't know exactly how strong that sand was. It's very compressed sand. So that was not a problem, but anyway, that was done. They were built up to ground level. When she approved, I built it the rest of the way up with no crossbars. And I want to emphasize that it was an easy matter to add crossbars. It's minutes of work. I had all the rebar out there and cutters and so forth. So there was no motive on my part to simplify the thing. I had no knowledge that I would need more reinforcements, and I was not told I would need more reinforcements if I went with standard concrete design. You would have lateral reinforcements to prevent cracks, it turns out. But I didn't know about that sort of thing. And here it was. I was not trying to get any more strength. I was trying to use the same reinforcements. I was just increasing the size of the concrete to get a little more lateral strength. So that was what was going on there. So that was all approved verbally. And then in 2008 to 9, I constructed the upper piers and installed steel beams across them. So I don't know if you have drawings, but I should have drawings here. Anyone wants to see the drawings? Excavation piers. Okay, septic system. To give a quick idea, this is the guest house. It's viewed from above. It's just 20. It's 24 by 24. If from here to here, crosswise, it's 24. But the piers are 12 by 12, and there's a 6-foot overhang. And so the idea was to create a set of beams. I'll skim through these drawings real quickly if I can and give you an idea of the pier structure pretty quickly. But it's essentially what you've got is 4 piers 12 feet apart in a square, and perched on top of them are 2 beams going due north-south, I think, and 2 beams going due east-west, and those are 24 feet long. And so that and they're actually pairs of steel channels because it was too heavy to carry high beams. I couldn't get them up the hill with the weight. So I ended up, because I had to row them out, and each one was several, I think 300 pounds or something for half of an I-beam, half of an I-beam. So they were brought out in an interesting configuration with the rowboat, and they were winched up the hill with a boat winch lashed to trees. And then special rigs had to be made to lift them up on top of the piers and set them down between the rebars on top of the piers. So that's the technical situation. And the original plan for the piers was to have the round piers latch on to have the rebar fold over and go on top. But that was changed to a stronger arrangement. If I can find it here. I'll try to abbreviate this, but I don't want to leave anything out. These are mostly my handwritten notes. Drawings. I think I have those here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so here's the south end of the island, and here are several triangles that are more than 100 feet from shore. And they're not really triangular because if you actually take the radius from the shoreline, the triangle's inside the real 100-foot boundary. And for those who don't know, this is the south end of the island. These triangles, those are the ones that chose that one. This is the only one big enough. build a house on. So, and also very quickly, okay, this was the original plan. A small house up here, 800 square feet, and two approximately 240 square foot quote guest houses. I think one of them was originally a little bit smaller. So there was a long but small cabin on top of the sharp hill that was dropping down, and then this had the bedrooms had to just go off, but there was no way to hook them up. It was too steep. And so that was quite a problem. I won't give you the whole story, but I'll finish the timeline because that's what you wanted. Okay, so the permit expired in 2009, sometime after I finished it, but I didn't know it had expired. I didn't know what the term was. And apparently sometime in 2011, the CEO was reassigned and went to some other job with the town. I didn't know about that either. I wasn't building during that period because of the recession. I didn't have any money. I was out of work. No engineering had occurred for several years. Didn't dare spend anything. And I had a back injury from trying to carry all that stuff from the piers. So I was going around on canes and with an old backpack rigged as a back brace in my car for months, and didn't dare carry more than a very little bit of weight or I'd be out of work again. So I had to do that. I couldn't work on it for a while. I wrote a letter to Ms. Berry again in 2012, not realizing she had been gone for some time, with the photographs of the piers as built and so forth, and got a letter instead from Mr. Mitchell, the new CEO at that time, who said the permits had expired, contact him immediately. And a few days later, in April of 2012, I met with him. He had just started work, and he said, if you have a permit, which I thought I had, continue working until I get a chance to check over all the drawings. So I did, but the only work that I did after that point was a long-awaited task, which was when I put the steel I-beams, the channels up there, they were supposed to be welded together every few feet, and I hadn't done it because I had got a welder, but it didn't work. It was too small, and I had to hire a welder to go out there and do it. And then when he checked it all, he said, no, the permit's expired, which I thought was not true because she said she was going to renew it, and I didn't know what the terms were. So anyway, it was a relatively minor additional bit of work that was done. And so I stopped, and I said everything was done in August of 2012. And he sent me a letter at the same time saying the permit has expired, here's a new permit application. I wrote him back that no work is going on there now, end of September 2012. There was no work at all done for several years. And then in July of 2016, Mr. Charette had taken over as CEO, requested a new survey, new septic system design, a survey as built, and a new septic system design because the rules had changed, and a new SRCC approval. I got the new SRCC approval and had the septic inspector come out, and for those who were worried about the septic system design because of the fact that I mentioned in my letter that it was extreme, I'll tell you how hard it is. I've never seen soil this strong before. The soil is all, according to the septic system guy, who was a geoengineer, whatever they call them, it is fine gravel and coarse sand that is highly compressed. It's about 10% stone, rounded glacially deposited stones, 3 to 18 inches max, and about 10% of it. In order to dig it, you can't, of course, do anything with the big stones there, but it was, if you get down about 2 feet, it is so compacted that just kicking the shovel would just make a little fly up. The shovel might go in an inch if I kicked it as hard as I could. It's very strong, they just call it highly compacted soil. It has much higher load-bearing capacity, but it's also very permeable to water, like regular sand. There's not that much change in the permeability to water. So it turned out that it was fantastic soil for foundations, and it's fantastic soil for septic systems. It goes straight down. It's not going to go down the hill, it goes straight. There's no bedrock under it. It's all glacial deposit all the way down. So that was good news. And I had the septic system checked over by him because the rules had changed and you had to have a larger leach field area, and they were using a special kind of leach field device. Don't remember the name of them, but it's a set of devices that essentially just accept fluids and let it drain down. And they accept relatively a lot of fluid for the area, and he knew he could use it because the soil permeability was so high. And so that was good because it wasn't that convenient to build a septic system there. It had to be in a certain spot to be below the buildings and not be outside the 100-foot boundary. And of course, there were 3 oak trees right there. So, and they're still there. They still got to come down. The biggest one I got down finally, but went through 3 chainsaws, sawing it up into oak beams. They were not the best chainsaws. So anyway, so that answers the septic system problem. And to finish the chronology, I did get the new septic system design. I did get the survey as built, showing that I had made an error, not in locating them, not in the, but when we went from a 4-foot overhang of the beams from the 12-foot on centers columns, piers, to 6-foot overhang, I had taken the precaution of making the piers far enough back from the boundary that there was 2 feet from any wall so that any overhang of the roof or whatever would not even go over, even though apparently they don't care about that. But I didn't change that when we went to 6 feet. And in fact, the beams, when they surveyed it, there was some variation, partly because, you can't see it on here, but one of the corners of the triangle is behind a pair of trees. And you have to kind of guess a little bit as to where you are on the other pair of trees. And the line can get moved a little one way or the other depending on where you think you are. And one of the photographs he has does show a line between 2 stakes, but one of them is a stake I put in hypothetically because you can't see the line perfectly from those trees. The other stake is the real stake, but it's probably pretty correct. But it's probably just a few inches off. Anyway, the survey showed that indeed a couple beams did protrude over the triangle, the survey triangle envelope, but it's not. But that's on the sides where there's a much greater distance to the shore. Let me show that if I can find it here. So it was not actually a problem, it was just hypothetically a problem. Okay, here it is. Here is the triangle that we're building on, and this is approximately north this way. And this is toward the shore, toward Lake Ararat community. And here's the pier, and the topography is dropping rapidly. Here's where the larger house would go, right on top of the hill. And the 2 guest houses here and here, and this is one I was going to build first. And here are the 4 piers, and everything would have been fine, but when we extended it, one of them goes slightly over the boundary. Maybe I have a better copy here. No. But I have it somewhere. One of them goes about as much as 18 inches over the 100-foot, over the triangle line, but these are the actual 100-foot line from the shoreline, as swung from points surveyed on shore, so the actual 100-foot shoreline is much further along. So it's not really close to 100 feet from shore, and it doesn't matter anyway because the septic system, here's the triangle, the septic system is over here in this corner, which is pretty accurately located. Well, that double tree is one of the ones that has to be taken down to put the septic system in. And the septic system is roughly here, and it's a little larger now. So I gave our present CEO the new actual as-built survey, and also the new septic system design. So this took all of the summer or so to get all these people together and to do all this stuff. And also the new SRCC approval, no problem there. And so then we came down to the question of how about changes, how about the engineering approvals? Well, we never had engineering approvals. We had, because I sent in good drawings, and it was obviously vastly stronger than necessary, and the CEO at the time said, this is fine, go ahead. And I recollect being in her office and seeing a man she identified as an engineer studying the plans. So she evidently had somebody look at the plans, and I only remember him saying, well, it's okay. But everything was obviously very strong. It's only a 1-story wooden building, after all. And the piers were very strong. There's a fireplace in the main house, but it has a separate concrete foundation and so forth. None of that's been built. So that's what happened, and then we got to this unfortunate problem of the present building inspector is held to an existing code, which he identified nicely, the sections of it that it should meet presently, but that's not the code that it was held to then. And so we get into the complication, well, what code applies to what, and what should be done. Should I go out and get it re-engineered? So I talked to about half a dozen engineers, and they all just wanted to rack up huge fees. I've run into this problem before. You get an honest one, and I'm an engineer. I don't do that. I work for large companies, but some of them do that. They just, it's another opportunity to rack up an engineering fee for a subdivision, and that's what they'll try to do. And they'll invent complications, and you'll never get a simple solution out of them. They wanted to analyze the pier loads. Now these piers are enormously strong. I won't say you could put a battleship on the thing, but you could put loaded trucks on one of those piers without a problem. They were trying to convince me that, oh, the piers have got to be changed because if you had a hurricane from this direction, at the time, while you had a full load of snow on top and all the snow was unbalanced on this side, then this pier would exceed in its footing load per square foot on that soil the minimal amount of pounds per square foot of that soil. I don't remember the actual figures, but it's like a fourth of the typical amount for that degree of it's low. And those were extreme conditions. So they knew and I knew, and you could spend a lot of money and prove that if you dug down and did an actual compression test on that soil, it was really compacted soil, very strong. It was not what you'd find in the middle of the forest somewhere if you dug down. It was not soft soil. Soft soil would take 35 pounds per square inch or so. Maybe a ton per square foot or something like that before it squashes down. But this stuff will take a lot more than that, and we were only allowing, I think, something like 3,200 pounds per square foot, and that wasn't quite enough. But we knew it was probably more than 14,000 pounds per square foot because of the nature of the soil, but I couldn't prove that. And they were going to force me to dig down and get soil tests for every, this would be frightfully expensive to do, and we all knew it was pointless. So that wasn't good, and the worst of it, and in addition to that, we also knew the permit had been granted for the piers on even smaller foundation bases, and with the same real loading conditions. And so what does it mean? So then you have the complicated, what does it mean when you've granted a permit? What have you permitted? It turns out, if you do the research, it turns out once a permit has been granted, there's something called a vested right of continuing construction, as long as there's some visible evidence of some construction having been done, which obviously there is. But what does that mean? Does that mean I would insist that I should be able to go to it? Originally, no, I'm perfectly willing to make any change that makes sense if people think it's needed. I would never turn it down. If somebody came to me in an engineering project and said, hey, this doesn't look good enough, I can't imagine anybody saying, oh, let's just go do it anyway. No, they'd fix it right away. Because people want things to work, especially if you're going to live there. But even if you weren't, you'd want it to be good. But on the other hand, totally re-engineering everything at enormous expense, knowing that it's okay and that it's been approved, wouldn't be fair either. So that's what we came down to. What is the degree? It's not just a question of who's at fault. It's perfectly obvious that there was this informal process of approval and a regulation change, and there were delays that were nobody's fault, and changes of staff that were nobody's fault. None of us are responsible for the recession and all those things that caused, all the delays that caused. But things do change, and I'm perfectly willing to adapt the design, particularly the part that hasn't been built. And I'm perfectly willing to make sensible changes in the part that has been built, if we can come up with something that's reasonable, that will make it stronger if it really should be stronger. And I've proposed a couple of things. I could propose other things. So that's the timeline, and if I can have just a couple more minutes, take care of any public questions in case somebody has to go. I noticed there were several repeated questions and letters that came back from a butter letter describing the project, and they're reasonable questions. And one was, I already mentioned the septic system capacity. Septic system capacity is great. That's not going to be a problem because the leach capacity is great, and the septic engineer thought everything was jolly. So I don't see any problem there. Somebody was concerned about bringing a Coast Guard certified vessel to pump out sewage. It's not a cesspool, it's a septic system. If it ever needs cleaning, I'm sure it's not going to be fun, but somebody's going to have to cart it out of it. But it's not going to get much use here, so it can only be used in the winter time and probably in a large place, so it's not going to have very many people using it. So that's not likely to be a problem. Regarding noise, there were several people who raised the possibility that because the energy system might have a generator running all the time, would it bother people? And so that's not a problem. The actual plan, and this is part of the plans that are approved, is to have a generator with a battery. And in fact, if you look at the plans closely, you'll see that there's a separate outlet for every outlet. There's a separate outlet for a DC inverter power. So it's actually AC, but it's not perfect AC. It comes from DC, generated from DC. And the idea is, I realized in analyzing this that we were not going to be able to put in solar collectors, as one person noticed, because you can't cut down very many trees there. To put in solar collectors, you'd have to have them on the south shore and make it vandalized, so we couldn't do that. But what we can do is run a generator for about an hour a day on the far side of the island from the shore. And they aren't very loud anyway. And a small one, I've got a 3,000 watt and a 6,000 watt generator. They're both pretty quiet. And just run it 1 hour a day, not late, of course. And during that 1 hour, you use any power tools that you're going to have to use. You recharge the batteries, and you can run any other high power item that you're going to need to run that wouldn't run off the inverter. So otherwise, you use a fairly big set of batteries and you use a relatively high power inverter system, which is just a system that uses transistors as switches in order to create something pretty close to an AC wave out of DC. And that way you can run AC appliances off of it. If you get a cheap one, it doesn't do a very good approximation. The motors don't like it, but they run. And if you get a more expensive one, they like it. And you can do the same with your computers and electronics and stuff like that. So it doesn't use much energy. And it would be like a quart a day, something like that. There's really not that much gasoline. And it's pretty quiet. I don't need earmuffs or anything when I'm right next to it, and nobody's close enough 500 feet. So I don't think it's a problem at all, and it's only 1 hour a day. And I think that answers the public questions that
We'll deal with the public after. They'll have an opportunity to ask questions, and we'll respond after that. We're primarily looking for information why you think the code officer Ed is not granting you a renewal.
Well, I think he's saying correct things. I haven't found things that are wrong about what he's saying. He has to do certain things and the rules say certain things. But now we're in a curious situation in which the previous code officer gave me permission, and he's saying the rules have changed. Legally, you can insist. I would never do that. You can insist that you've got a permit and therefore, but I wouldn't do that, especially if somebody has a legitimate objection to the original design. And he's right, there are cracks. It turns out that if you make those, that's not me, I don't know who that is. There's somebody, so it turns out that if you make a 16 by 16 inch concrete masonry structure, it will contract enough that it'll form microscopic cracks. What I didn't know is that concrete always cracks when it cures, and it just doesn't show it. And the reason it doesn't show it is that there are horizontal, lateral rebars that tie it together. And I had put some in, and I do have 3 going one way, 3 going the other way, small rebars in the seams, and but usually not close enough together. So it does show vertical cracks. It would be better. There are several possible ways of remedying that. One is to realize that it's not even, if you put that entire little cabinet on a concrete block on each corner, it wouldn't settle on that soil. So it would be fine. It wouldn't have good, well, it would be okay. So it's not a question of strength, except if you come up with extremely rare conditions, very unlikely. Then it's much more likely that when they get hit by a tree than anything, than a hurricane. We would never have a hurricane, or that the snow would be so deep, 5 feet deep on one side of the house, and so forth. Not very likely at all. So it's probably strong enough. I'm upset that I was not told, because after all, I can't know everything. I submitted a plan is the best I know, and I'm sure the woodwork is good, and I'm sure that the concrete was good up to the 10-inch wide. And when I submitted a plan just showing that I made it 16 inches by 16 inches, I would expect to be told, hey, you got to put in lateral rebar, and that would save you. And how much trouble would that be? And I've got all the tools and the rebar right out there. I would have done it in the trice if I thought it was necessary. But I didn't know about that because it's not my business. So yes, we do have some practice there. I know a couple ways of fixing that. One would be, but they're all, they're burdens, and they're not easy to do. What sounds easy would be to say wrap 3/8 inch rebar around it, and pounding it around the corners, and then put a 2-inch concrete shell on it, so that it would be bonded properly after cleaning everything, and so that it would be bonded properly, and that would hold it together laterally better. We could do that, but to do it properly, you'd have to dig up the whole thing, and it's an enormous amount. I don't have it in my back anymore. That's the problem. It once was just another few days of exercise, but I know I can't do it now, particularly because just under the soil around that, where that fellow standing where a shovel is, there's a layer of rocks about 8 to 14 inches thick or so that were designed to give the top of the pier ability to transmit force to the firmer soil outside the excavation rather than the fill soil inside. You make it a little stronger just for the heck of it because I had the rocks. They'd have to be poured out of there, and then the thing has to be dug up again. It took me about a week of heavy manual labor to dig each one of those holes because the sand wants to collapse, so you have to dig it and then put shoring. So I prefabricated some shoring, put in there so rocks and things wouldn't fall on you while you're down in there trying to dig it deeper. It turned out to be a lot of work. And so to dig them all out is a huge job, and then clean off the pier and then try to make a new wrap and haul all the concrete out there and all the rebar and do that. I mean, it's a season's construction work to do that. There was another objection, which was that the beams are not sitting on a steel plate at the top. Now, I've done other construction where I was requested to put a steel plate at the top of a beam on top of concrete, and I did, but this one is so lightly loaded, I didn't indicate that I would do that, and nobody complained. So I don't feel responsible for that. I feel that I was told that it isn't necessary here, essentially implicitly told that's not necessary here. So I feel kind of cheated by the fact that nobody told. I don't feel that anybody tried to cheat me. I feel the process didn't work. It was the process of people not communicating, making implicit approval, or just show us what you did or what you're going to do, and no one objected. So I assumed that the proper people had looked at it. People who knew more about it than me, in short, in areas where I didn't know, who had looked at it and had decided that it was okay, so that's what I should build. It would have been easy to put in any additional things then, but it's not now. So another possible fix would be to use them as they are, just fill in the gaps, assuming that they're okay on vertical load, which they almost certainly are, and then put in cross bracing. And I didn't have a sketch of that, but one could add to the lateral load capabilities, which would ease from the standpoint of the engineers by putting in more cross bracing. It's much harder to do once the piers are built. You'd have to build some kind of a frame, weld it to the beams that go off on each side, and have it cross over, and then maybe push on the seam, maybe have a piece that goes into one of the border seams down near the ground, not above the snow level, but near the ground, so that you'd be transmitting the force, the lateral force from one side of the house down through two of those things to push on the lower beam on the other side if you had a heavy load. That would increase the lateral wind resistance nicely. But it does seem to me that what we're down to is a process that didn't work. Not anybody on the town side or my side who was trying to do anything wrong or wanted to do anything that wasn't anything bad, worse than perfect. But the process didn't work, and I can't reverse it. I don't have the back anymore, or the joints on my right side to do this kind of heavy work anymore. I just can't do it. I've tried it. You can push yourself so far, and then you're on canes and you can't do anything. So I can't take it apart and redo it. I can't easily dig even those things out anymore to put concrete on top or move all the concrete and the rebar there. It's hard for me to do that stuff now. The only reason I'm not here on canes is that I don't do that anymore. So for 2 years I haven't done any manual work, and so now I can walk around and pretend I'm perfectly healthy, but I know what my limits are. So it seems to me that what we're up against is not anybody doing anything wrong. It's a process that didn't work and a necessity of finding a reasonable solution, which I'd like to do. See if anybody has any questions. If you have questions, I could answer them.
We may have some questions. We're going to hear from Glenn when you're done. If you're
Sure.
completed at this time, I'd ask Glenn to come to the mic and give us his information.
Good evening, Board. We will look at the timeline of events, and I'll make this pretty quick. The original permit was issued September 20th, 2005. All this you have in your paperwork. A letter from Patty Berry.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Yes.
I got a question. Can
Yep.
you explain your position with the town? We know you're a code enforcement officer.
Yep.
You're also the health and safety officer of the town?
I am.
Okay. We'd like to have that so the public understands it,
Okay.
your capacity.
So I am the code enforcement officer and a building inspector for the town of Waterboro. Exhibit 3 shows you a letter from Patty Berry explaining to Mr. Barth that his permit had expired and there hadn't been any inspections. Mr. Barth says he sent in dozens of pictures, and I suspect he probably did. I don't have copies of them. The packet on that project is fairly thick, and all I have is, I don't have any pictures of anything. Exhibit 4 will describe how Mark Mitchell, the code enforcement officer after Patty, told Mr. Barth the same thing, no inspections and the permit had been expired. And Mark Mitchell sent him a second letter, August 2012. In a letter from Mr. Barth, July 5th, 2015, he acknowledged the building permit had expired. August 16th, 2016, Mr. Barth submitted a new building permit application. After that, I sent Mr. Barth a letter requiring additional information. There were 15 items on that letter. He has fulfilled some of those items, but not all of them. Is everybody with me so far?
That's got it, Exhibit 8. Exhibit 8 will give the 15 items that the code enforcement requested.
The letter with the 15 items is dated August 24th, 2016. At that time, I requested Mr. Barth for an engineering stamp on the existing piers in structural steel. He did hire an engineer by the name of Joe Neville. I talked to him briefly on the phone, asking him, this is what I need. I never heard from him again. I suspect, as Mr. Barth explained, that his fix was expensive, and so he was kind of put on the table. Let's see, the Waterboro ordinance is pretty clear. It gives a timeline on when permits expire, and that timeline is 2 years. A code officer can extend that permit provided the work has been more or less ongoing. The project hasn't been ongoing, it's been dormant for a lot longer than I've been present as CEO. Tammy, would you get, or Dwayne, would you kill that row of lights, please?
We'll get them yet.
Yep. There we go.
There you go.
All right, everybody recognizes that guy. Mr. Barth, that's Gary Lamb. I'm not sure if you recognized him or not.
Oh, okay, yeah, it looks a little bit.
Town administrator. Him and I paid a visit to the site. He's standing there to give you an idea how tall these piers are. And we'll have some better pictures of those cracks that Mr. Barth has already talked about. Next picture, Dave. As you can see, the piers are constructed of hollow core concrete blocks, mortared and filled. I have no documentation of what kind of footing they're sitting on. I have no documentation of how they're filled or rebar. You can see the cracks are extensive. This is caused from rainwater getting into the blocks, freezing and expanding. Yes, you will get cracks like that on foundations, but foundations are a lot more mass than a 12-inch by 12-inch concrete block. Next picture, Dave. Steel I-beams. We'll have a better picture of this, but the steel I-beams are sitting on top of the concrete blocks, supported by 2 half-inch rebar coming out of the piers, welded to that first course of steel beams.
You mind if I make a correction there?
Right after I get done talking.
Sure.
The steel beams are actually channels that are welded together. And as you can see, that pair welded together is stacked on top of that pair. Next picture, Dave. That's a tack weld. So these are C-channels that are tack welded. And all of them are like that. I don't know the gauge of the steel channels. It doesn't really matter. As you can see, he tried to cover the tops of the piers with tarps to keep the water out. The tarps were pretty well dilapidated the day Mr. Lamb and I visited. Next picture. This is the rebar I was describing. So the rebar comes out of the concrete piers and is welded to the side of the C-channels. And I'm thinking this was done to keep the channels secured to the piers, which isn't going to work. Mr. Lamb is pointing at some corrosion, which you can't see in the picture. That tells me that the rebar is not coated for concrete contact, so water is seeping down in and around the rebar, and it's rusting inside that concrete pier. Next, Dave. Concrete pier, again, what I think is a footing. I don't know what that is, but these are all hollow core concrete blocks, stacked and mortared. And I'm not an assuming kind of fellow, but I think those are probably filled solid. The code doesn't recognize concrete blocks for pier construction. They haven't recognized concrete blocks for pier construction in 25 years. So this whole assembly is non-compliant, and I don't know what's in the ground. Mr. Barth probably does, because he did it with sweat and glory. But that doesn't help me. And if I have to sign off on a finished building, I have to feel comfortable that Mr. Barth is going to be safe in it, and any future inhabitants are going to be safe in it. Next picture, please. A lot of severe cracking, horizontal and vertical. I'm not an engineer, as I described to Mr. Barth. He wanted my recommendations. I wouldn't give him recommendations. I'm not an engineer, but I have been in construction over 30 years, and I know that's an issue. Again, we pulled the tarps up so we could see the cracks in the concrete piers. Do I have another one, Dave?
One more.
Okay, this is a great overview of the steel columns. Actually, these aren't columns. Columns are vertical. These are horizontal. So my issue, if this is the superstructure to hold the building, there's nothing in place to keep them from rolling on top of one another. 2 pieces of rebar that are welded to this bottom cord are not sufficient to hold that bottom cord in place. These steel beams are tack welded to the first course of steel beams. Completely inadequate, in my professional opinion. Let's see. He talked briefly, and I know we're not here to talk about that, but he mentioned it, so I'll kind of follow him. We talked about setbacks. He has admitted that the structure is not in the building envelope, and he's right, but it's outside the building envelope by almost 18 inches. That's a violation of the ordinance, so he's going to have to correct that. Gentlemen, that's all I have at this time.
May I answer some of the structural concerns?
Yep, and go ahead and respond to
For those who are well picking up the slides in line.
concerns, and keep it specific to what he just talked about.
That's what I wanna
don't
do.
go back over the other stuff.
Yeah, so regarding the steel beams, yes, they are C-channels that are welded together, and they're quite strong. They're extremely strong compared with static and dynamic load. As to the securing to the piers, they're actually 4 rebars. They're filled with high-strength concrete. They're hollow core only when they're manufactured. They're filled with high-strength concrete, mortared, and they're half-inch rebars that go through them all the way down into the bases, which are typically 32 by 32. I think one of them's a little bigger on one side. And those 4 rebars are welded to the beams. They're not just tacked on there. They're welded securely to the beams. The beams aren't going anywhere. They're quite strong. It is true that at the base, the beam is narrower than the space between the rebars, and the welder just tacked on more rebar in between them, which will hold it from moving in ordinary conditions, but it wouldn't hold it sideways. It's not going to hold it lengthwise, of course. It's the one above it that's holding it to the pier. However, the top of the lower beam is welded to the I-beam, to the rebars, and so is the upper part. So they're very securely attached to the beam. As to corrosion resistance, you don't treat rebars for corrosion when they go into concrete, because when rebar rusts in concrete, it's not supposed to be in salt water, but when it rusts, it forms what the concrete guys call a complex of which is actually better at resisting corrosion, and it's perfectly strong. I didn't believe this until I talked with the concrete bridge designer. They do rust. They wouldn't make rebar that wasn't treated for corrosion if they didn't intend this to happen. It's true you don't want fresh water falling on all unprotected steel all the time, but it was only supposed to be for a short time. It hasn't corroded very significantly. You will see some corrosion on that steel, but at surface corrosion is not significant effect on strength until it gets deep, which is mostly in salt water, so you're not going to see very much of it there. That could be, and I've done a lot of steel that's a lot older than that, where you just sandblast it or rub it with acid and scrape it and then prime it with a high zinc primer. It's good as new. So I don't have any concerns about corrosion of the steel or the filling, and of course, I was told it was okay, so we did it, and it is all to explain, and I do have plenty of photos. They were emailed. That's why I put it on copies. There are plenty of photos showing the lower parts of the piers, and they're pretty much the same as the upper part. It's the same design. It starts with a 36 by 36 or so by 8-inch deep form, where we had half-inch rebar grid going one way and the other way, and then we had the rebars coming down and crossing over each other, so they're very securely in the form, and then the blocks have to be stacked on after that. So yeah, the lower part is the same, and it's quite strong. So just to answer any concerns about that, it would be nice if we could have avoided any rain exposure and weathering, but it's not very significant. As to the cracks, I've looked at them pretty closely. I only found one horizontal crack. That one that you showed is the only one I remember. They vary. I would say there are probably a good 6 cracks, and each pier has at least one crack. They're mostly not very long, but one of them is something like 4 blocks tall. And you'd still rather not have them. But it's, as I mentioned, it's not that there was anything that I could have done, wouldn't have done to prevent it had I been told. And there's nothing that I could have done afterwards to get rid of that, other than adding a layer with rebar or something around it. So, just to address your concerns.
Thank you.
I guess at this time, I'd like to ask any participants in the audience if they'd like to come up and speak. If you would, please state your name and
My name's Gary Zuger. My wife and I live on Tower Circle, and if you were standing on our property, just to give you a reference, looking due west, we look at the island. Quite honestly, after sitting here for an hour, I don't even know where to begin. I'm not an engineer, but a couple of things I've noticed that I have problems with. I was an electrician for 48 years. The last 38 years, I ran my own company. One of the things I found early on is if you go into any area to work, town, city, community, the first thing you do is you go to the people who are making the rules, whether it's a CEO, an inspector, or what we know in the trades as an AHJ, authority having jurisdiction. Clearly, he's not from this area. He didn't do that, or he did it with Patty. I find it unbelievable that considering you're trying to build, knowing what my wife and I went through to get permits and stuff to build on lakefront in Lake Arrowhead, I find it just unbelievable that somebody would come into this area, want to do all this on an island, and take Patty as a word. And I'm not saying, I dealt with Patty years ago when I was doing stuff on my place, but to take this woman as her word, being a municipal employee that comes and goes, and this project's been going on since 2005, my wife and I, over the course of from 2004 to 2014, we're trying to do additions, remodeling, renovations, and if it lapsed into another year, the first thing we're doing is, okay, now what? You know, who's in charge? What's going on? You know, and this is what I think was a fault to him. Also, the fact that he didn't want to pay for an engineer. The whole idea of having an engineer on your project is that this guy signs off on the project. This guy would have gone to see Glenn or Mike or Patty, and he would have made darn sure that whatever the town of Waterboro required would be done, regardless of the cost to the customer. So this is the way it is, this is the way it's got to be, this is what you do. And for Glenn to step up and say, well, you haven't been able to build piers out of cement blocks for 25 years. If you do the math, that was in place before Mr. Barth came into town with this property. So right then and there, I'm going, what are we still doing here? And you can't tell me, like Glenn said, you start seeing cracks in concrete, you're going to have a problem. If you see it on the bridges going all over Maine, I mean, water and concrete, when it starts, you're going to have an issue with it. I don't have a problem. The man legitimately bought the land. I could see where he'd want to be out there. It is a lovely island. I look at it every day. But I'm having a real problem with when things come up that contradict Mr. Barth. It's, well, I this and me that, and you know, I couldn't afford an engineer, so, but this guy said this was okay, and this welder said this would be okay. It's like, you know, what am I supposed to do? This guy has his agenda, and he's just coming before us and, well, yeah, you know, an engineer probably would have said this, but I know it's okay. I know the concrete's okay because it's reinforced concrete inside the blocks. I mean, seriously? I mean, do we have an engineer signing off on that? Do we have a concrete guy signing off on that? Do we have, you know, any of this? I mean, we just, I honestly can't sit here and say, just hearsay from Mr. Barth that everything he did is up and up when right from the get-go, the piers are wrong. So that's...
May I answer those concerns?
Any Any other members of the public? Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Thank you.
I'd be happy to answer those concerns.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments? Please step up, state your name.
Bradley Sheridan. I have a vacation place on Ridgeway Circle. I'm right next to the beach. I look out at the island. My purpose here isn't to stop him from building. My feeling is if he bought the land and it was buildable at the time he bought it, he should be grandfathered in. That's my own personal belief. However, I do have a structural background, and in my past, I didn't speak up, and a wall cracked, and I knew it was going to crack. And when I told the owner the contractor was at fault, I knew it was going to happen, and he said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" So ever since then, I've tried to play, if I know something that's unsafe, I try to bring it to the open. So my purpose here is maybe to help Mr. Barth make something safe rather than unsafe. I'm a structural engineer by education. I've worked in construction for 35 years. I'm not registered. That was by choice because I work for the federal government. And if I became registered, I could be sued. If I stayed unregistered, they'd have to sue the federal government. After I retired from the federal government, I worked as a quality control manager for a construction company for 9 years. I was the quality control manager on the Messabusick Middle School. I gave Patty tours on the meeting days. Not all the time, but I know Patty. And the code enforcement officer is 100% correct when he says he should have a registered engineer review the design and stamp it, because this construction doesn't follow platform framing or foundation walls, the stuff that the code is pretty clear on. When you go beyond that standard residential construction, and the code doesn't address these other elements, you now have to have an engineer, a registered engineer, review it and say that it's safe. And then you have to have somebody make sure that the critical elements have gone in the way it was designed. The cracks in the pier were caused by water freezing. Even if the water didn't get in through the top, masonry block can absorb water and it can freeze. You don't make piers out of masonry block. You make piers out of concrete or steel. The concrete is reinforced with stirrups to prevent those cracks from happening. The engineer that he alluded to about talking about horizontal forces, he's correct. That engineer is correct. This type of design is the worst type of construction for lateral forces. You're putting a mass up high and you're supporting it on toothpicks. He's correct on the soil being very strong. I have no doubt that that can handle the weight and much more. But that's if he just looks at that, his comments are correct. And when you put a wind load or an earthquake load on the building, you have this heavy mass, and then you have these chintzy little piers underneath that their main point of weakness is in bending and shear. The horizontal reinforcing that he put in between the joints, I think you said they were 3/8 diameter, useless. He probably put that in because somebody mentioned when you're building a block wall, you have to have every other course reinforced. When he says concrete cracks, yeah, concrete walls crack, foundation walls crack, but they're tied in at the footing, locked in at the ground with the backfill, and the slab can't move, even though it's cracked, it can't move. And the top of the wall is tied in with the flooring of the house, so it can't collapse in. So if you get a crack in the wall, harmless. If you get a crack in a slab, harmless because there's dirt underneath, it's not going to collapse. And the crack, when he says concrete normally cracks, that's correct. But that's a large pour, like a slab or a wall. When you start going more than 30 feet in concrete, as it cures, it shrinks and creates tension in the center, and then you get your cracks. Piers are not large areas of concrete. They're small. They don't shrink And like I said before, they have stirrups around them so that they can't crack or burst anyway. So this really should be designed by an engineer, or at least reviewed by an engineer, and a structural engineer, not just any engineer. And he should approve it as being structurally sound. And then just by hearing his efforts and the conditions out there, at one point he had cross bracing. That would solve the problem in the house tipping over in a wind or the piers shaking and shearing off. That may be his most practical solution. But
That's not for us.
I just want to
discuss.
support the code enforcement officer. He's pretty much right on target, and I think that's the way it should go. And like I say, I'm not trying to stop him from building it, but based on what I know, I would feel bad if something down the road happened to that structure. I was up here when they had that earthquake. My whole house shook, so I know it's possible to happen.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Loretta Zuber, Tower Circle. My husband spoke earlier, but I would just like to reinforce the septic system. Mr. Barth said there wouldn't be a lot of people there and you wouldn't have to pump it. Well, we all know you have to pump your septic system, and if you don't, what will happen to the lake? I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about the sound of the generator. He says 1 hour a day. I don't think you can run a house on that, but those are my concerns.
Okay, thank you.
May I address some of those concerns?
Hmm?
May I address some of those concerns
Yep.
from valves and...
We're not gonna go back over old stuff, though. Just to answer.
No. Regarding the concern of the engineer, I think he's quite right. It would have been nice to have required an engineer to do it at the beginning, and it appeared that an engineer had been consulted, but I was not asked to get an engineering approved drawings in a small place. And if I had been, it would have been a relatively easy thing to get it engineered at the beginning. And would have solved it would have prevented problems. But I was not asked to do that. It was approved without engineering drawings. I agree, cross-bracing would be probably the easiest solution. Though one has to retrofit cross-bracing is a much more complex thing. So I feel that I've done everything that I could do. The town did not want, I did load calculations, for example, elaborate load calculations. And I told Patty, I've got the load calculations. And what calculations? Didn't want to see them. So I did the best I could, and I complied with all regulations that were in place at the time that I was told about. And I thought it was probably quite adequate. And so it's regrettable, but I certainly haven't done anything deliberately because I have no motive, and B, I did not have knowledge of those details that turn out not to be good. And that's why, and then regarding the septic system pumping, there are ways of pumping. I don't recall the septic engineer's view on this, but there are ways of pumping out of place, particularly if it's not used very often. Even if it's in a remote location, it's just more expensive, it's more inconvenient. Noise is not a problem. It's like running a lawnmower for a short time, and it's a long way from anybody, so that's uncommon. I can promise that won't be an issue.
Thank you. At this time, Hope?
Yes, I'm Loretta Davis. I live directly across from the island. I can stand out my kitchen window and I can see one side of this first side of the island to the other side of the island, to the lower side where she's talking about putting the generators and stuff. The island on that point is not very wide, and that sound is going to echo up over that island, over to us, over to the people behind of us. Right there, it's just going to come to up there. I cannot see how that can be quiet right there if we have the generators on the downside. That's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you. Before I open it up to the board, I just want to look at this a little bit. Yes, Glenn, earlier when you got up, I asked you to address the fact that you were a health and safety officer representative of the town, and I think that's a critical thing because I think there's some serious safety issues. And your code your position as a code enforcement officer is to monitor and make sure that all structures are built to current codes.
Correct.
Doesn't matter when the initial permit was issued. This is my interpretation and impression, is that the permit was issued, good, bad, or indifferent. There's no change in that. However, you didn't complete the structure in the time frame that you had to reapply. That should have been done. Obviously, looks like a 10-year time frame had elapsed and beyond, and you've had to come to the code enforcement officer to apply for a new building permit,
Well, she
not a
said she-
renewal.
She said she
because
had
it's
renewed.
gone beyond that point. And personally, I think that the code enforcement officer has asked for some requests in here that would be made of anybody that was applying for a building permit today, and to fulfill those. And because you're asking to do something that's a little off the norm, it's not the standard customary construction practices, the code officer, I believe, has the ability to ask for documentation and proof that your structure is going to be sound and safe, not just for you today, but people in the future, or anybody that happens to go on that island for whatever reason.
Yes, I'm not objecting.
So, I'm just saying that I believe that if you think it's as good as it is, and it's gonna work, then I think that it would be prudent for you to take the time and the expense and have an engineer come out and say, this is built properly.
Well,
It
the
will
problem-
meet
I've-
all of the requirements
Yeah. I
of the
mentioned-
current codes, because that's what you've gotta meet now, is your current codes.
Well, it's not quite that simple, because I was essentially deceived
Come up
into
here.
building something
If
that
you
I...
wanna address us, please.
Sure. I was essentially deceived by a bad procedure into building what's there. I had no wish to build anything less than an excellent structure, particularly with all that labor and it being so easy to do it one way versus another way. I had no wish to do anything. I was deceived by an improper, vague procedure. No one asked me for engineering approvals. I was asked for detailed drawings, and I gave those, and they were approved. I don't have any objection to, for example, meeting requirements, new requirements for the structure that's not built, even though in principle I shouldn't have to, but I don't mind doing that, because I would like to make sure that that's acceptable. But I think so what we're really discussing is, what do we do, or what is the fair way to handle a situation where I have been essentially deceived by an improper procedure into building something that I don't want to be built the way it is, because I don't want to depart from the code or good engineering practice. But I was told, this is fine, go ahead. And that's what I did. So I feel badly deceived because something should be done, but on the other hand, I didn't want or do anything that I was told not to do. I didn't do, she said she had renewed the permit for whatever number of years it was, at the point where I wasn't quite done yet. And it was done by the time it had expired, although I didn't know that it was expired yet. And so all that was done in accordance with permit. And the usual way that these things get arbitrated is people say that there's a right to build it as it was originally permitted. I'm not asking to do that. Because if there's something wrong with the design, or to say the rest of the design, as it was originally designed and approved, I'd like to know about it and get it fixed. Maybe there is, and maybe there isn't. And with the present design, I really feel betrayed, but not by people, by circumstances that were beyond my control. But it was the town that was involved also. And so it was really process. The responsibility is the issue. Fixing this is not easy. I can't afford to do it. I can't do it myself. It's not my fault. And so the question is responsibility for whatever we fix. And that's why I proposed that we come up with some kind of a solution that is practical just for what's there. And I don't mind going further for the remainder of the structure that's not built yet and doing whatever's required now. That's fine with me. But I think we have to find a way of coming up with a reasonable solution and a shared cost solution, because I can't.
We're going to stop you there. You've been offered a reasonable solution by having a structural engineer come out and look at what you've built. You had no inspections throughout the process, which is
No, I did what
wrong.
I was told.
You were supposed to have inspections throughout the process.
No,
to the
I
point
wasn't.
You are.
I was not, and now that's the
That's a
requirement, but she said
requirement.
don't do that.
We're not, but the code officer today has asked you that if you want to build on what is there, you need to prove that that structure is sufficient to carry the load that's gonna be placed on that.
I understand
From this
that. Mm-hmm.
point on. And for him to ask,
Yeah,
for
but what do
you
you,
to
but
provide
you understand the problem.
engineering, a structural engineer to come in and say, this is okay, or you make this modification and this it'll work, or it doesn't work at all.
That's what I was trying to explain
Is,
earlier.
I think, well within the code officer's rights to ask that, because.
Yeah, but it's not within the rights of the situation to demand that I cover the cost of that, because I was told to build that. I was told to build that.
No, that's what you presented, and you were approved, but you never completed. So you can't look at what was down the road, way
I'm
back.
just- I'm just
That
talking-
doesn't matter. You have to look at today.
Well, you're right about the structure that's not complete.
And we're not talking a 1-year lapse here. We're talking from the beginning of 2005 to 2018. That's 13 years to do it, and it's.
No, it was done
You
with-
come and
it was
ask the
done-
code officer to do something, to issue you a permit, and he's made a reasonable request to provide these 15 items.
It would be reasonable if I had not been told to build it the way it is. I was told to build it the way it is.
Codes change.
That's
Things
not-
change,
but that's-
rules change, laws change.
That's not a
And
principle
I'm
of
sorry,
law. The
but
principle of
unfortunately,
law,
that's
sir,
the
the
fact.
principle of law, sir, is that there is a vested right to complete it the way it is, or you have to pay to change it. You asked me to say that. I would like to be
We're-
congenial. But you're pretending you don't have
You're-
responsibility. The town doesn't have
you're
responsibility. The
incorrect.
town has full responsibility.
You have a responsibility to build within your time that your permit was issued.
All the
You
building
didn't
was
do
done within that
that, you're
time.
asking the code officer to issue you a new permit. He's telling you he will if you meet
I know all
these
that.
15 conditions.
You keep repeating
He's
this,
not
sir.
telling you you can't. He's asking you to provide documentation
You're
and
making a wrong
confirmation
assumption.
that this is gonna be
You're making a wrong assumption. I don't
structurally
mind
sound.
that. I don't mind
Okay.
that. But it's a wrong assumption that I have to do that. It's a wrong
You're the property
assumption.
owner.
No, it's a
You're
wrong
the
assumption.
applicant for the building permit.
I have a
correct?
permit, sir.
No, you don't.
Yes,
Your
I do.
Permit expired in
The
2007.
construction is done on that
Your
permit.
permit expired in
You're-
2007.
We'll get into any more. Okay?
Hmm?
I think we're starting to get a little bit out of hand.
No, we're not. His permit expired in 2007, so he's asked for a new permit. So the code officer has asked him to provide this information, and if you do, you'll get a
You
permit.
keep repeating the same
Okay.
thing, but
Yep.
the problem is you're making a wrong assumption. I would like to point that
There's
out.
no assumption.
Maybe I haven't said it
It's
right.
accurate.
No, the assumption, the construction that was done in accordance with the rules at the time. And the principles of justice are that one should be able to go ahead with that. I've said I don't insist upon that because I would like to do it right. Okay? And I don't mind even re-engineering the building parts that haven't been done. I don't know that they'll need it, they might need it. The problem we have is not that. The problem is that what is there was built as I was told to build it, as it was approved, and within the time of approval. All that was done right. And if he insisted, so that's the only issue. The issue is, does he have the right to insist? Well, he can insist if he wants to, but that's the town's expense. The town told me to build that, and there's a vested right to have built that and to continue that construction. So we're in a gray area is what I'm saying. I'm not annoyed at you. I'm trying to clarify this assumption. I was afraid we'd get to the point of one person assuming that the other guy's responsible, but I don't want to do that. That's why I started out trying to say it differently. Trying to say that I don't think anyone deliberately cheated me. And I certainly didn't deliberately cheat anyone, but I would be the only one to lose. So, and we know that the process was informal. We can't apply a later process to an earlier process in accordance with the principles of justice. And so we have to find a solution. It's a tricky case. That's the only reason we're here. It's a tricky case where he's right to say this is what the rule says now. She was right, presumably, to say what the former CEO to say that that's what the rule was then. So we're in one of those in-between situations where we have to come up with a just resolution. And I've gone further, I think, than necessary in saying that I'm willing to share some of that burden. not just the burden of doing it, the rest of it the new way, if there's a different way, but some of the burden, if I can do it, of making the existing structure more compliant. But you have to understand, this is a nearly unsupportable burden to me now. And it is not fair, and it would not be supported by an arbitrator or somebody to say that that it's all my fault just because the borough wants that and the other. They wouldn't say that. They would say, no, he had a vested right. But I don't want to be that way. I want to be much more congenial and practical about it. I put myself in your situation. What would I do? We have a situation where the town's process somehow led to this situation. And it's not this guy's fault. It's not our fault. It's not the previous CEO's fault. It's not the present CEO's fault. We've got to find a solution that's fair within those guidelines. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's why I've spent so much time. I did not actually hire an engineer. I talked with 6 different engineers, and they all wanted enormous complications of analysis for a very simple project. I couldn't find one who was going to be fair about it. And it's nice to have a proper analysis. It should be a proper analysis. But it's not. But it would require completely redoing it. Well, completely redoing it is not my fault. If I build something, it would be the town that would have to rebuild it. But it's not very practical to do that because it's difficult to work there. And so it's a tough situation to resolve, and we can't resolve it by just assuming that one guy is guilty and the other guy is innocent, because anybody can assume whatever they want. We have to come up with a practical solution, and that means keeping what's there, maybe re-engineering the stuff that isn't built yet. But I'm willing to go that far. I don't have to legally, but I would be willing to, because I'd rather make sure it's done right. So I think if we can find a way to keep what's there and find the lowest cost practical way of making it right, making it good enough, then and that's why I think it had to come to you folks, because it's not within his authority to break the building code. On the other hand, we got to come up with a solution.
Can I stop this for a minute? The ZBA is only here to determine whether the code enforcement made the right decision.
Yeah, no, we understand that.
And we're going around in circles
No.
here, trying to find a solution, and it's not the ZBA's it's not the board's problem to find a solution. The solution is between you and the code enforcement. If this board determines which one of you are correct, whether the code enforcement made the right decision or you made the right decision, it's the board's duties to do that, not to come up with a solution for you.
The only problem
And we're not going to go any further back on that. I think we've had enough response. We're going to give everybody here at the table an opportunity to ask any questions or comments, and we're going to go from there.
Should I remain up to answer questions?
Hmm?
Do you want me to answer questions?
If we ask one specifically of you, then we'll ask you to come up and address it. At this time, I would ask any members of the board to have any questions for the appellant or code enforcement office, please.
There was no application filed before the end of the 2 years to extend, correct?
Nothing that I have a record of.
Okay. Sir, you have no record of that either?
What period are you talking about?
I think you're asking if
you had reapplied.
if Patty
What I thought.
Yeah, and Patty gave you another building permit or no?
In 2007, Patty wrote me that a new permit was needed, verbally assured me that she would renew the permit herself. I sent her a letter that crossed in the mail with the drawings of the pier changes, and then she said that that was okay. That was all in January.
But you never received a building permit?
Well, she said she renewed it.
No.
No.
She didn't send me anything.
Okay.
Did you go in and pay the application fee for the extension and fill the paperwork out for it?
Did they pass that thing on CMT, on the electric company, where even if you're a self-sufficient home in Maine, you still have to be connected to the power grid? Did that pass or no?
I don't know. I don't, that we don't care about, that's not an issue here. What the issue is whether this permit did expire, and he has asked 12 years later or 13 years later for a new permit. It's up to the code enforcement officer to issue that permit, and he can obviously, I think, he has the right to ask for additional information when he has concerns, because he is the health safety officer of the town as well. Not just code enforcement is one thing, but that impacts the rest of the residents in this whole town. Potential issues. And it's within his right to ask these questions.
Oh, no,
And to meet that, no, I'm just saying, that, you know.
I'm just trying to make sure there was no second permit issued, you know.
And even if there were a second permit
It would
issue,
have
it
been up to
doesn't
2
matter,
years.
because that's still expired.
Well,
This
that,
is so
well,
long.
what I'm saying is there was no way.
Now, I have to ask, I'm gonna ask this question beyond Glenn's capacity. Has Saco River Corridor issued any new permits on this property
Yes, they
as well?
re-permitted. They twice
You have an
re-permitted.
up-to-date permit from Saco River
Yes.
Corridor?
Yes.
When did you get that?
Oh, the latest one would have been, was 2016, I believe. Yeah, well, yeah, July 14. I wrote, oh, no, that's when he wanted the SRCC approval, and I went and got that in 2016, I think it was.
When did you get the approval?
Oh, here we go.
Because their
Yeah.
permits expire as well, so you'd be required to update the Saco River Corridor.
No, that's not expired.
His permit was renewed 5 times. It won't be renewed a 6th time.
That's right. You're gonna have to reapply the whole gamut again.
But you understand, the reason I brought this to this board is to avoid suing the town. I have a legal right to continue this process, and I will. I'm not going to pay $30,000 to rip out Piers and build more. The town's going to pay that if you're not willing to compromise. That's why I brought it to this board. I don't
You
want
can
to
go
do
court
that.
and deal with that. What we're dealing with is whether the code enforcement officer acted properly in requesting you to fulfill these 15 obligations.
I don't question
And then
that.
he'd issue you a permit. Any other questions?
No, I mean, are we in discussion now, or are we just
Well,
asking
this
questions?
is questions for here, and then we'll go into discussion.
No, I have no questions.
Okay. Very good. At this time then, I would say that we're going to close this portion of the public hearing. We're going to go into discussion and deliberations amongst us.
People can stand. It's an open meeting.
Yeah, you don't have to stay. You don't have to leave. You can stay. What we've done now is we've closed the public hearing portion, so there'll be no input from the public unless we ask specifically to have that. And the members have to ask you, the chair, to ask permission to ask the question. Right now, we're in deliberations and discussions amongst ourselves.
My feeling on this situation is the permit expired, and when a permit does expire, you are required to follow the new rules of the new time when you get your new permit. So going forward, to get a permit today, he has to follow all the rules of today, not what he started with in 2005. And I've seen this happen multiple times in my years in construction, and it's just the way of the land. You have to follow today's rules.
Same as a driver's license.
If he had completed the house during that first permit, everything would have been fine. But because that permit expired, he has to follow the rules of today.
That's not the legal status, unfortunately.
What's that, sir?
That's not the law.
Yeah.
The law is that once
I don't
there is
think
some,
we're
once
public
construction has
discussion.
begun, there's a
Yeah,
vested
we're
right.
not dealing with lawyers. and
Okay, well, you need to
all of
look up
that.
vested rights, gentlemen.
Anybody else have any?
I agree. I
Yeah.
completely agree with him. Permit expired, so anything beyond that is, is beyond us. If he's going to go to court, whatever, that's what it is. But our job tonight is to determine. Well, we already know that the permit expired, so it's to determine whether he's grandfathered or not, which obviously he would not be if it's expired.
And we're not even here to determine if he's grandfathered, because that's not, even that. It's really whether Glenn has acted appropriately in asking for this request of these items to be met with written information and documentation to prove that this is gonna meet the current codes. You have to understand, we're here to help everybody that we can, but unfortunately, it doesn't always go the way they want it to.
Well,
And we're
understood.
required by law to uphold the ordinances of the town of Waterboro.
That is right, but the
Period.
reason I brought it to you is that,
And what we've done is we're looking at this in that capacity. And some of us do have experience in construction. And I will tell you that if that was my house with piers cracked like that, myself and my family members would not be in there until I had a structural engineer come back and say, yeah, you know, it's just.
Yeah, but
a
you're
surface
implicitly
crack,
blaming me.
and it's gotta be fixed.
See, you're
So the fact
implicitly
that the
blaming
health
me.
and safety officer and code enforcement officer has asked for that documentation, I don't think is unreasonable.
no, it isn't, but you're implicitly blaming me and
And
leaving
he
me the
has the
town
right to do that, that is his job, that's what he's entrusted and hired and commissioned to do for this town, is to make sure that all structures meet the codes.
That's right, I
Period.
don't disagree with you on that.
Whether you like them or not, the codes, I build. I don't always care for every single thing that's in there. Some of it I look at and say, ugh. But you know what? At the end of the day, I have to build my product to meet those codes.
Yeah, but this
If
isn't
I
that
don't, I'm not
situation.
gonna get an occupancy permit, and he's asked for, the items he's asked for are not unreasonable.
No, they're
by
perfectly
any
reasonable,
means.
but not in this situation.
So we're done with discussion, I'm just letting you know there. I would entertain a motion at this time, or I guess I would
I'll make a motion.
ask, we're gonna close the discussion, and I would ask for a motion to either, one, vote to affirm the decision of the code enforcement officer, or deem the building applicant permit valid as presented. CEO shall issue permit with no further certifications nor new building permit applications. Does everybody understand that?
Yes.
So if you want to affirm that the code enforcement officer voted correctly or administered correctly and we are affirming his decision, I need a motion for that. If you don't think he did and that you deem the original building permit to still be valid, and ask the code enforcement, or instruct the code enforcement officer to issue a new permit with no further certification or building permit application. It's gonna be one or the other. So I'd entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that, to affirm the code enforcement's, this officer's decision on, I forget how you worded that, but.
Which is affirm the decision
yeah,
of the code
his
enforcement,
decision,
simple as
yes.
that.
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a second. Any discussion? No discussion, all in favor? 4-0. Okay. Now, at this time, the chairperson shall declare for the minutes the vote outcome, which is 4 votes to 0, vote to affirm the decision of the code enforcement officer. At this time, I will advise the applicant if he is unhappy with this decision, he may request a reconsideration by the board within 10 days of date of this decision. Parties aggrieved by this decision may appeal it to the Superior Court within 45 days of the date of the decision, pursuant to 30-A MRSA 2691, 4353,
Would you
and
cite
the
that again,
main
sir,
rules
please?
of Civil Procedure Rule 80B.
Can you cite the legal citation again?
I will provide you with that.
Okay.
Cam, you'll make sure you have that information so that you can,
Yeah, it'll go to court, it'll be extended.
you can move in whatever direction you choose. Okay? At this time, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All right, second, all those in favor? Thank you folks for coming out tonight.